Hey guys, it's DIY Bri, and today I'm going to show you guys how to repair the temperature control in a 2004 Toyota Highlander. The temperature control on this vehicle flips from hot to cold depending on whatever. You're just driving down the road and the thing goes hot or it goes cold. What's happening in there is there's a little broken ribbon. We need to pull the temperature control assembly out and actually solder the little ribbon back together, and that'll fix this problem. Alright guys, the first thing we need to do is pull this trim panel off. Basically you just stick a flat-headed screwdriver underneath the trim pieces here, and you just kind of pry up, carefully not damaging the plastic pieces by scarring them up or anything like that. Comes off without any electrical connectors. It's basically just held in there with a few pieces. Got a clip here, a few clips here, so it's pretty easy to pull off. Then you just got to take and undo these few bolts here. Okay, now you could take your 10mm with a nut driver and start taking out the bolts. Place the 10mm bolts in the cup holder. Be careful not to drop them. Alright, then you just pull the complete control unit out and start unplugging the connectors on the back. Now on these connectors, they've got a little tab on the top that you've got to push down in order for them to pull out. Sometimes you can do it with just the squeeze of your fingers, and other times you may need to take a flat-headed screwdriver to push on the tab. So there was 3 connectors in the plugged into the radio. There was also 3 connectors plugged into the temperature control assembly, and then you have your radio antenna as well. Make sure when you reinstall these that you plug them all back in, and don't forget your radio antenna. Otherwise you won't have any reception. Okay, so now we've got to remove the temperature control assembly from this unit here. You want to start by taking these screws out. This just pulls away from the radio assembly. You can set that aside. Next, you've got to remove these small little screws from the back of this plastic piece. There's a couple screws down here, plus you have 6 other screws, so I think you've got a total of 8 smaller black screws that you have to remove. Okay, so this piece is actually connected to another piece that has got a ribbon, electrical ribbon in there. We've actually got to disconnect these so that we could get this apart. This ribbon has just a little locking mechanism. This thing actually pushes down to lock the ribbon in, and you lift up to pull the ribbon out. So to get the ribbon undone, you reach in there and grab this little black clip that's in here, pull that up, and the electrical portion of the ribbon will just slide right out of there. When you go to reinstall it, put it down in there, lock the piece back in. Now what's common to happen on these is right in here there's a little ribbon where the wires actually go into this little portion of the circuit board. And you can see on the other side, this is my temperature knob from cold to hot. If you pull the knob just straight off, there's a little nut back there that you can undo this nut, little washer. Then you just work this little clip out of there, and you can actually see the problem on this one. Let's see if I can get this light here. Alright, so here's where the problem actually lies. You can see the knob actually connects to that right there, and it slides through this little hole. And right there is a little weak spot where the wire that goes through that ribbon connects to that one solder piece and actually breaks off. And this is what causes the inability to be able to control your hot and cold correctly. So what we've got to do is actually solder that connection right there back together. Alright, so you can see here I've got the back of this little knob assembly, and actually after better inspection I noticed the wire was broke on that one and also that connector as well. Now there's different methods to be able to repair this. What I prefer to do is actually take your desoldering pump and suck the wire and the solder out of the connector. So what you do is you take the little pump here, stick it on the connector, heat this up a little bit, and actually suck the solder out of the connection. This is going to allow us to be able to disconnect the ribbon completely. So you want to do it on all three connections. Make sure that you work out all of the solder out of the holes as much as you can. Okay, so now you can see I've taken the solder out of the holes. That's going to allow me to be able to stick the wire up through and resolder the connection. Okay, so now you've got to actually strip this little rubber insulation off the little tiny wire there, and you actually got to be really careful not to cut the wire too short. It's kind of tricky to get this insulation off without damaging the wire. What I found is I take this little wire stripper here and put it on the 18 gauge. Actually just kind of strip it off like that. So now I've got the one wire strip back, I've got the other one, now I've got this little center one here. Okay, so now you can see I've got all three wires stripped back. Depending on the length, you may want to add a little bit of length of wire to this. You may want to just work it back into the switch. You may actually want to just run over to Radio Shack and pick up you know, a piece of this ribbon here. You can get this 3 conductor ribbon and cut it to the length you want and replace it on both sides. Okay, so one important key when soldering this, you want to take and put some solder on each one of the wires individually before you stick it through the hole of the switch. Then you've just got to carefully feed the 3 little wires up through those holes. Once you work the wire through, solder a little bit on the other side. Okay, so now you can see I've got the 3 solder pieces back together. I've got the ribbon from the wire going down and soldered back into those connections. And then I've reinstalled the knob. So now I've just got to reassemble the temperature control head to the radio and then reinstall it in the vehicle. You've got to take this plastic piece with the ribbon and you've got to carefully get that slid down into the locking mechanism. Once you've got it shoved all the way in, lock the little black tab by pushing it down, and that'll lock the ribbon in place. Locate all your little black screws, there's 8 of them. And what I'm doing with these little drill drivers is I just kind of start the screw and get it all the way down, but I don't really try to tighten it up much so that I don't break the plastic. I'll go through and just use a screwdriver to hand torque all the screws. Okay, now you can take the radio and reassemble the heater control piece to the radio bracket. Alright, so now we've got the radio reassembled in the temperature assembly. It's time to reinstall it in the car. Alright, now start with plugging in all the harnesses that plug into the radio first. Make sure you line all the correct connectors up. Don't forget your radio antenna. Grab all your 10mm screws. Get this baby fired up. Get it to warm up a little. See if we can actually determine if the problem is fixed. If we can get the heater up to temp, we can run it from cold to hot and see if the problem's actually fixed. It's a lot quicker with a drill driver. I would suggest using that, but I misplaced my bit to attach the socket to the drill, so I'm using the old-fashioned nut driver. Would be done by now if I had my drill driver. Yep. This baby working here. Go through and retorque all 6, make sure they're all tight. Looks like my radio works. Gonna reset my clock. Nine 14. Okay. We'll reassemble this little baby. Get that on there like so. Give it a good little smack. Okay, time for testing. What we're going to do is we're going to put it on vent here. We're going to turn it on. That's definitely hot air. So that's what I'm looking for. Means I've got it in the hot position. Let's go into the middle. And that feels pretty middle actually. Let's go to cold. And it is going to cold. So, as you can see guys, what do we have here? 10mm socket nut driver, flat-headed screwdriver, or just your fingers, pull that baby out. We've got a Phillips screwdriver to undo the pieces in the back, soldering iron, some patience, and you can have your hot and cold switch back to normal. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. I really appreciate comments. Really appreciate you subscribing to the channel, liking the video, sharing the video. Any way that you can help promote DIY Bri greatly helps me out. Appreciate it. I'll keep coming up with things and ways to fix different cars, houses, plumbing issues, electrical issues. I try to seek out different things that'll help you guys fix your projects at home.